Welcome to Security Weekly. I'm your host, Matt Alderman. We are recording live at DEF CON 27. We're at the Social Engineer Village. Joining me for this interview is Perry Carpenter. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're going to talk about you
Yeah.
in your presentation here in a little bit. And what interests me about this story is I have an autistic child.
hmm
And you're going to talk a little bit about your autism and kind of your
Yeah.
path here a little bit. Give us a little kind of precursor into your talk.
Yeah. So, as I was saying before we put the headphones on, this talk is terrifying for some reason right now. I was diagnosed later in life, and all throughout my life before then, I kind of knew that I was different. In one piece of writing that I put out recently, I talked about how I kind of identified kind of like an alien or alien anthropologist, kind of looking at the world around me, trying to figure out why people do the things that they do, believe the things that they believe, act the way that they act, um, and so on. And so over the past few years, it's come to light as I got my diagnosis that there's a name for that, and it's called Asperger's syndrome, which has recently been reclassified just as autism spectrum disorder.
Right.
And it's answered a lot of questions, but it also opens up a lot of new things that you have to think about. But overall, there have been a number of things over my life that whether intentionally or unintentionally, I've learned how to use social engineering skills and other skills in order to achieve a modicum of success. So now I'm a C-level executive at KnowBe4, and we focus on human behavior. So you can kind of see one of those things that people on the spectrum are well known for is this idea of a restricted interest. So for me, my restricted interest was human behavior, and it linked to security. And early in life, I was into magic and misdirection, and later in life, I got into street hypnosis and pickpocketing and simulated mind reading. And it was, it's all pivoting around why people behave the way that they do.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so I just talk about how over a period of years, I learned how to put on different masks. I learned how to present really well in front of groups of people, how I immersed myself into the speaking culture to kind of try to break the monotonous tone that I used to have. I mean, back in high school, and regardless of what you think about people on the spectrum, not showing emotion clearly, I did feel a little bit of pain when somebody referred to me as Mr. Robot, or somebody said, Perry is an emotional robot. And I look back, and at that period of my life, I can definitely see how I always gave that impression. But later in life, probably when I was 30 or so, I got put in some situations where I was having to lead teams, present very frequently, and so on. And so I went and modeled myself after some of the speakers that I admired.
Right. You kind of pick a role model
Yeah,
or
pick a role model.
a mentor.
And I saw it as picking a mask to put on at the time. Not that I wanted to fake what I was doing, but I wanted to be able to emulate somebody.
Is that because it gave you confidence by mirroring somebody or using
Yeah,
that kind of mask? Did it build your confidence level? Is that why?
I think it did. It dissociated me a little bit, so it's not me that's on the stage doing this thing. I'm not revealing so much of myself, but I'm kind of picking the me that I would want to be on stage and projecting that. And so I learned how to do all the probably hopefully if you're hearing some voice variants and things like that, all of that got injected at that period of time. Another thing that happened, actually two things collided about the same time that really I think worked out well for me. Um, and I'll touch on one thing that happened before that, because I was working at Walmart at the time in their security department. When you get elevated to a certain position, they want you to go through the Dale Carnegie
Right.
training course.
Okay. Yep.
And in that, there's a lot of public speaking, whether you like it or not, and a lot of trying to figure things out. And so at the end of that course, I got the award for the most changed in any student that was there. And so that kind of propelled me. It gave me a little bit more confidence. Later on, I was working doing security at a different company, Alltel, before they were bought by Verizon. and I ran their security awareness efforts and anything related to an enterprise security initiative, so transformative
Yep.
in nature. And at that time, I was doing a lot of work trying to also just flesh out ideas. So I started to plug into the blogosphere and do some writing, and then ended up being introduced to some folks at Gartner. So Alltel acquisition happens by Verizon. I ended up going to Gartner, and now I'm in a position where I'm also not just having to be intelligent, but I'm having to articulate that on the phone every day and
Right.
speak in front of people. And about that same time, also the pastor at the church that I was attending had an issue and had to step down. And I, in my background, had some theological training as well, and so they were facing the decision of, do we close the church that we're in, or do we find somebody that can sub? And so now I am teaching once a week in front of people. I'm also walking through the wreckage of human life with people and seeing their emotions. And then I'm also doing the Gartner thing. And so every day of every week, I'm having to get in front of people and learn how to express ideas in a way that they understand,
Right.
learn how to deal with the emotion that's coming from them, and learn how to reflect that out in a way that creates change in whichever environment that I'm in.
Yeah, and I think what people need to understand is the spectrum of autism is very broad.
Yeah.
Very wide ranging. You're on one side of that spectrum. My son is actually on the opposite side of that spectrum. And so a lot of people stereotype autistic people in not having
Yeah.
connections with humans, right? And you've worked through that in what you've done through
Yeah.
your career where we're having this conversation, right?
Yeah.
My son never had that problem, actually. My son is very socially
Yeah.
adept. He loves people and he loves talking to people. He's more slow when it comes to learning and learning disabilities, but he doesn't have the social things that a lot of people stereotype
Yeah.
autistic people with. So he's never had to fight that. In our life, it's more about what's that right skill set and that thing that motivates him when he graduates high school to
Yeah.
move forward. You had some different things that you've been fighting
Right.
through because you're doing this, right?
Yeah.
You're going to get up and talk about
Yeah.
your life and your story here in a
Yeah.
little bit, and that's kind of nerve-wracking for you.
Yeah.
Hopefully this is helping, by the way.
No, it's helping me kind of straighten out some thoughts verbally, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, and I mentioned this briefly also before, that my son is also on the spectrum, and so he's also very, very social and very he expresses emotions really well. But he's also the same way I was at his age, very rigid in thinking, very hot and cold when it comes to my opinions on other people, and so yeah, it's really interesting to see. It seems like in the literature, and if you talk to therapists, there's something that happens at about age 40, where people that are on the spectrum tend to, it's almost like an epiphany moment, but it's not. There's something that happens within their brain, and they naturally are more self-aware and aware of the feelings of others. They have more empathy. They're more coachable in a lot of ways. Realize that there's gradients of, I hate to say right and wrong, but I think you understand what I mean.
I know what you mean.
And so I would say to anybody that does have a kid and you're seeing a lot of those things, that if you trace a lot of the people that are socially aware and they're autistic, there are good things that are in store for them later in life, because being intelligent is one thing. Not having emotional intelligence is a completely different thing.
Right.
And so if your son can have a good conversation with somebody,
Right.
if he can even get the surface level knowledge to start an entry level career, he's got a good path. I kind of went the other way. I was really good at technical things. And I was the guy that when I was coding back at Walmart would unplug all the lights overhead, and I lived in a cave and would never talk to anybody.
Right.
I'd code for 10 hours and it felt like 5 minutes. And I had to be brought into the social
Yeah, you
world.
had to kind of be brought out of that environment into the social environment.
And it was because I was good at coding. It's like everybody gets promoted to their level of incompetence.
Right.
And I had to decide, well, do I want to go back, or do I want to try to move forward in figure out how far I can take some of the little awakenings that I had early on.
Yeah, and it's difficult.
Yeah.
Because again, there's a lack of comfort there,
Yeah.
right? You're out of your comfort zone, and that will tend to keep people in
Yeah.
the environment that they're in and not come
Yeah.
out and try the other things.
And I'll be honest. So going in and giving a security presentation in front of thousands of people is easy for me because I can disassociate from that. It's
Right,
not
okay.
individuals. Talking one-on-one or 1 to 3 or a small group of people, that's excruciating. And I did a lot of both of those at Gartner and in my role now. And I go in and I can become the person that I want to be.
Right.
But at the end of that day or that couple days, if it's a conference, then I just have to unplug and let everything kind of filter back in and try to recharge a lot.
Exactly. Now, you published a book.
I did.
Transformation Security Awareness. Is this some of your learnings and your life learnings that are in this book?
So one of the things I'm going to talk about is this idea of restricted interests and connected domains within that. And so a lot of the connected domains come in that.
Got it.
And so I talk about how we use this term security awareness, and I think it's a misnomer.
Yeah.
And so I draw a few things out of that as just because somebody's aware doesn't mean they care. If we try to work against human nature, we'll fail every single time. And what our employees do is way more important than what they know, because knowledge doesn't stop a breach, but action decision does.
Yes.
And so if you could see in that, there's a lot of human behavior aspects. There's also a lot of, I get into design and marketing principles and how we change people's opinions on things. I get into the fog model of behavior and how everything relates to motivation and ability and prompting. And I get into social constructs and how we can use social pressure. Even right now, I'm hearing myself, I'm so much more comfortable talking about this than the other. But how we can use all of that and how we can create programs that actually drive the behavior that we want rather than just throwing information at people and hoping for the best.
Right. Oh, that's great. Perry, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for watching. We'll be back soon.